Hi, thanks for joining me. My name's Ed and welcome to what is my inaugural video here on what I hope is going to be called Ed's Garage as a channel. I haven't done the research yet to make sure that's available, but that's what we're going to go with for now. This video today is going to be a little bit different because I had something happen a few months ago that was a failure on this guy right here. This is my 2008 Yukon XL Denali. Great truck. We bought it brand new back in 2008, and to date we've got about 143,000 miles on it with a lot of towing miles. We're probably towing somewhere around 15–20% of the time. So the failure I want to talk you through and what was the remedy for it had to do with towing my 6x12 cargo trailer. I'll pause here so I can insert a picture and you get a look at it. So this cargo trailer, it was empty at the time that I was hauling it up to our Wisconsin property in the last day of August of 21. Had to get it up there. The day was about 83 degrees out. Anytime I'm towing, I always turn the driver's information center on the truck to transmission temperature, and I'm keeping an eye on the coolant, and to this day they've never gone up. Yeah, the transmission temperatures run up some where I've dropped and taken 6th gear out as a possibility until things cooled back down, but in general this truck has just been fantastic. Before it we had a 2000 Suburban with the 5.3 Vortec. That was kind of weak, even though I ordered it with a 410, knowing that we were replacing the 5.7 of the previous generation Suburban. So back to my story. We were towing this trailer empty, 1,500 pounds, but if you saw that trailer is sticking a good foot above the Denali here. And in addition to the part that's sticking above it, as wind wraps around the Yukon and gets to the trailer, which is 3–4 feet behind it, it's already putting a drag, and it gets so much that we can actually hear back pressure from the draft coming through the rear window trying to open the glass in the rear window. You can just hear that pressure going against it. So this trailer, not because of its weight, but that it's a brick wall you're towing through the air, puts a decent load on the truck. To give you an example, if I'm towing that trailer, it really doesn't matter much empty or full, I'm going to get between 10.5 and 12 miles to a gallon. Where if I'm towing my boat, which is 5,500 pounds empty, I'm guessing 5,900 pounds with gas and gear, that's going to get 12.5 to maybe 14.5 miles per gallon. So the truck works a lot harder towing that box. The aerodynamics has a lot more to do with it than just the weight of the load that you're towing. So on this day, we have a 205-mile trip, me and my buddy Jackson, who's wandering around in the garage with me here. We were 110 miles in, and we hit a pretty big backup in Janesville, Wisconsin. Maybe the truck was feeling nostalgic since it was manufactured in Janesville, Wisconsin, but I'm in the left lane up against the K-rails. We're backed up at least a mile from where a semi had broke down. Stop and go, and as I go to inch forward, when it's my turn, I got nothing. I've got the air conditioning running, I've got the radio going, but my tachometer's at 0. Panic a little bit, go to do a restart, it won't start. Naturally, I try this, panicking, getting the semi horns, but I'm dead in the water with the dog as my passenger and hauling a trailer in a construction zone. So, long story short, it took about 45 minutes. Highway Patrol came, they got a tow truck that was a flatbed, put the Denali up on the flatbed, backed up, picked up my trailer, got me off to the side where we could drop the trailer, and the car went to the Chevy dealer in Janesville, Wisconsin. A friend helped me out so I could make it back up to the Wisconsin property and continue with my trip. So the next day, the dealer hadn't gotten to it being dropped off. They've been quite busy with people trying to hold on to their cars. Come Thursday afternoon, I haven't heard anything, so I call in, and the service advisor tells me, well, it started right away, thought it might have been missing, we want to check it out some more. But, you know, each time we go out there to start it, it's good. It didn't record any codes. I should state that while I was stuck there on the interstate waiting for the tow truck, I would just get a fast spin. It was real obvious that either we're not getting fuel, we're not getting spark. Because of the coil packs here per cylinder, I wasn't thinking that it was probable that we weren't getting spark. And after many, many cranks across 45 minutes, there was never the hint of fuel. So, you know, that has been my belief that we just weren't getting fuel. Of course, my theory or suspicion was the fuel pump went out on me. At this point in time, we're at 137,000 miles. So, you know, I'm expecting the dealer to call and tell me that I need a new fuel pump. So they tested all day Thursday, no problem found. Friday morning, they give it a couple of more times, and they find nothing. So they release it back to me as a no problem found. My wife was coming up with my brother that day. They did the detour, picked up the truck, and drove the extra 90 miles to get up to our property where, you know, we used it all weekend. Matter of fact, we used it for the next 3 weeks and never had a problem. Over those next 3 weeks, we drove somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200 miles. Some of those days were in the 90s. Some would be starting out in the upper 50s. It saw every temperature, every workload, except heavy towing. And it was absolutely fine. So after about those 3 weeks, it's time for that trailer to come back home. Only now the trailer's loaded up and I'm probably coming home with about 3,000 pounds is what I'm towing. Still very light for this vehicle. We make it the first 50 minutes. The last 15 of those 50 minutes was on the highway at 70 miles an hour. So we make it up to an exit where there's a Costco that we favor to top off for gas. So I take that exit to go get gas. Of course, we have to stop at the end of the ramp and wait for the light. Then we go up a quarter of a mile till we get to the Costco, looking to make a left-hand turn. I missed that light as well, so I'm sitting there idling, and the truck dies. Same exact symptoms, behaviors, you know, we had been running on the highway, came to a stop, sitting at idle, it dies. Fast crank, no hint of catching in the least, it's just cranking, and no smell of fuel. So, you know, again, it looks like for whatever reason, we're not getting fuel to the engine. So this time isn't quite as busy as being on the interstate, rush hour traffic, and a construction zone. So I reach out to State Farm on the app, request a tow truck. After about a half hour, don't have a response yet. Try the truck again, it starts up. At this point in time, my wife and I just decide, let's at least get as close as we can. If it dies again, I want to be close enough to tow it to home instead of having to tow it to a local dealer again and somebody I didn't know. So we start driving, we make it about another 60 miles, cross the Illinois state line. At this point in time, we decide, okay, we're going to have to get gas to make it the remaining 90 miles to get home. Take the exit ramp. Again, don't make the light. We're sitting there and my wife makes a comment that, you know, the truck is missing, it feels like it's going to die. I wish I had really agreed with her at that point in time. Well, I did agree with her, it was missing, But I wish I put it in neutral and revved it, because 2 seconds later it died, and we're starting this process again of being stranded for at least 30 minutes, trying to figure out what's wrong. This time, after about 5-10 minutes, a nice gentleman with a Dodge pickup comes by, asks if we need any help, which first time anybody's asked if there was anything they could do. And I asked if he had any tools. I wanted to at least disconnect the battery and, give the ECM a fresh start and see if that would do anything. So we did that, plugged it back in, get the battery torqued back down. Doesn't do anything. Again, we're repeating, we're every 5 to 10 minutes trying to give it a turn. This time I haven't called a tow truck just because I'm hoping I can sit here a little bit. And it starts up. So this time it's running pretty rough. So I make it through the light, have a decent grade hill to climb here, and the truck doesn't seem like it's going to make it. It's, if it was running on 3 or 4 cylinders, that would probably be best. The StabiliTrak light went off. It was bad enough that I was starting to get concerned, am I going to blow the engine here, just trying to make it up this hill, but I didn't want to roll backwards as I'm trying to park this. Once we crested the hill, the engine started to catch up. It was able to run again, and believe it or not, we made it all the way home on that. So this time, when I plugged in the scan tool, I had a single air code, which is a P0300. So went and looked up, obviously 0300 is a generic misfire. It's not going to tell you any cylinder. And with how bad it was running, they were all misfiring, so that didn't tell me anything. So I just keep researching, because you really can't troubleshoot this unless it's right there. Now, when all this happened, I didn't have tools. I didn't have my Innova scan tool. Immediately at that point, the next day I went to Harbor Freight and bought a $140 universal toolkit that I could keep in the truck, and I took my Innova scan tool and threw it in so that if this happened again, I could at least check the fuel pressure. I could take a look at live data, see what any data looks abnormal, etc. So over the next day or two, I searched YouTube, couldn't find anything. Then I did more of a generic Google, and lo and behold, on a Tahoe forum, I found that I wasn't the only one, there were several people. A lot of them were 07, 08 Denali's with the 6.2, and if you're an 07, 08 Denali, that's the L92 engine, which is what we have here. Great engine. Back in 08, they didn't play with active fuel management or displacement on demand, so this thing is just pure power tuned for 91 octane gas. But I found that there were many people out there that had the same exact thing. When they were towing a large load, whether it was an RV camper or a big boat, it would just die. They'd be dead in the water 30 to 40 minutes, and then it would restart, and they had no idea what it was and the problem to chase. So everybody was having their guesses. One of them was a vapor lock, and that's something we had thought of, but I dismissed that right away just because we had been driving the truck for 13 years. Vapor lock to me is more of a design issue. This truck has seen plenty of 97, 98 degree days where it was working, pulling a load. So to have vapor lock at the end of 13 years, I didn't think that was it. Another gentleman in the forum felt that the fuel was getting superheated in the fuel rails up above the intake. So he went and put heat shields on it, and he thought that addressed it for him. Again, I didn't put any weight behind that solution for the same reason. We had 13 years of seeing plenty of heat, and that wasn't it. I felt I was chasing a heat-related failure. So the next one was a bad crank position sensor. And this started to make sense. If you have a bad crank position sensor and the ECM isn't getting a crank signal, I don't know this for a fact, but I believe what was going on is the ECM then shuts down the pulse of the injectors because it sees no crank signal and doesn't know what's going on. And that's exactly the symptoms of what we saw. We would just get cranking with nothing going on. So I looked it up. This was good news to me. A crank position sensor, a AC Delco one, which is all I would put in, is $50 via all the online retailers. The problem is, once you put one in, you should do a crank relearn procedure, which is 60 seconds. It's very easy, but you need a bidirectional scanner, and at that time I didn't have a bidirectional scanner. So I gave my local Midas a call right across the road, a bunch of good guys, and said, hey, I need this truck running by Friday. This was a Tuesday morning. Can I get it in, and I want you to just replace the crank position sensor? They pushed back that they don't like firing the parts cannon, they wouldn't want to do that, and I had to explain to them how intermittent this failure is, the research I've done, why I'm getting to that. They said, all right, as long as you're good with us writing it on there, that you're not asking us to troubleshoot or resolve an issue, you're just hiring us to replace a part and do a relearn. So they went and did that. So the part number, if anybody wants it, for the Delco brand crank position sensor for the 08 Denali was a W013-407-5070. Instead of $50, they charged me $72, which is quite reasonable for a markup. But then the labor was $251, which at their rate was probably an hour and a half. Probably right in line with the book. My All Data subscription says that in order to change it, you have to at least unmount the starter and let it hang so that you can have access and get to the one connector, the one bolt, and change it. So they did that work on a Thursday, and that Friday we were heading back up to Wisconsin. This time we had to pull the boat out of the water. Now that's only towing it 2 miles home to our property up there, so I wasn't expecting any problem, but we had no problem with that. Made it home. Still, I feel good that, we might have fixed the problem, but I don't know it. About 2 weeks later, I finally had the test where I had to hitch up that cargo trailer again and drive to my son and his wife's house, which is 140 miles, so 280 round trip. So naturally I was a bit nervous taking off. Of course I had the tools, phone was charged, scanners in the car, all set to go. Tickled pink when I pull up in his driveway, made it, everything's good. Made it home the next day, and I'm starting to think maybe this was licked. So then the very next weekend I had to make that same exact trip, fully loaded again. Another 280 miles, come back and all is good. Since then, unfortunately, my daughter-in-law, she went to visit some family for Thanksgiving, and we got a call Black Friday early in the morning that she just crossed from Louisville, Kentucky into Indiana, and long story short, her engine blew. So this thing was hitching up a U-Haul tow dolly, got down to Louisville, Kentucky as fast as we could, and then towed a Buick Encore from Louisville, Kentucky to Lafayette, Indiana, and then up to the Chicago area for an engine replacement. So after all that, I'm very convinced that the crank position sensor was it. So if you have that, that is certainly the route that I would go chase. $50, go test that out. It's very hard to test unless you've got a scanner with live data with you the second that it fails. Just wanted to share that in the story. Sorry I can't show you the fix, but I think the history and what to look for is pretty important. So if that interested you or you want to hear some more, I'm hoping you'll like the video, subscribe. I'll tell you what my next project is going to be as a follow-on to this, is I had mentioned All this time, my engine coolant temperature was right dead straight up. It's never gone above dead center. And transmission was always good. Yet, when I'm towing that big load, something is changing and creating additional heat, additional demand on the engine. So what I'm going to do next is put in a engine coolant temperature gauge. So this is from Glow Shift. I'm going to put it on the far left side of the top of the dash there. I chose that over going with one of the cowl pods and having to bend it with the heat gun and then paint it to match. And then to connect the sensor, when I hook up my new scan tool, all I get for engine temperature is a calculated value, and to my knowledge there is no sensor for engine oil temperature. So this plate is going to go where the bypass plate goes just above the oil filter on the LS engine. So many of these LS engines come with oil coolers where you have lines feeding up to the front to cool the engine oil. I don't have the data to know if I'm really raising my engine oil temperature when I'm towing or not. So step one is install this plate with a sensor, get it to a gauge, and I can monitor that this summer as we go through things. Another thing I'm going to do, I'm going to have to pause. The dog's going to bark at the Amazon. Sorry about that interruption, but Jackson has to make sure I know whenever the mailman, UPS, or Amazon comes by, and he doesn't have a gentle bark. So we're talking about some of the videos that are coming up. So I told you about the engine coolant temperature, and we'll get that going. And who knows, maybe it will show me that I am running significantly hotter, that, hey, at that point in time, I can replace this with one for 2 ports and run an external cooler up front. But first, let's get some data. Other videos I'm going to do within the next couple of weeks. I mentioned that I didn't have a good scanner at the time, but I since picked up an Autel MaxiSys 906 BT. So I've had that for about 3 months now. In general, very happy about it, but there's a few things that I think that it should do that it isn't doing. So I'll share that experience with you. And then finally, what I'd like to share with the community out there is a review of the lift that I use here in the garage. You can't see it because it is a mid-rise lift that is underneath the truck. I have a steel beam that's about at 8 feet here, so I couldn't go and put in a 2-post lift, which would have been great. So this little mid-rise lift from Benpack, it is a MD-6XP. But I've had that for 12 years, so a lot of knowledge on that, what I can lift, what I can't lift. And I'll be sharing that with the community as well. So looking for those videos. Again, thanks for your time. Hopefully it was useful for you, and you'll like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.